r/AskReddit. Parents of Reddit, what is the most dark/cling thing your children have said? I was explaining to my niece the difference between things that can and can't change about people. She was confused because she'd met a set of 3 siblings and the eldest wasn't the tallest. So I told her that one day even she, an itty bitty 4-year-old, could be taller than me. A big huge grown up. But even if she was taller, I would always be older. She looked me serious as you like and says you'll be dead sooner too. Not if you keep that hit up. Try me. Itch. Not a parent, but a former teacher. I taught English in a school in Spain, and I wasn't supposed to let the kids know that I speak Spanish, so that they are forced to communicate in English. A 10-year-old girl comes up to me one day, grabs me by the hand, and says, with the most horrifying straight face ever, "Te vas a la mute, or you're going to die." I was so shocked at the randomness of it that my jaw must have dropped. She then laughed her head off and said, "Ha, you do speak Spanish." She then skipped away, laughing and smiling. Creepiest thing a kid has ever said to me. And probably the most clever thing a kid ever did while I was a teacher. The sheer genius of that kid just left me speechless. When my cousin was 2 years old or so, her mom got pregnant again. One day she went to hug her mom's belly and said little brother sick. A few days later she had a miscarriage. Fuck. Right after a miscarriage? I hardly doubt she'd be in the mood to try again, bro. Sure. Why not? When you turn off the lights, that's when the black circles come. They come down like this, holds his hands in the air above his bed, and they stay for a second. Then zoop. They go inside, slapping the hands to his chest. Then, barely holding back tears. I hate it. Maybe a nightlight would be comforting for him? We got it sorted. This was all a long time ago. When our dog died, without us yet having properly attempted to explain death. Our then 2-year-old said, all her thoughts left her body. My nephew just did a low whistle and said she dead, then went back inside, while my brother and I tried not to cry about our dead dog that we grew up with. Brutal. I can't stop laughing at this. Not my kid, but my brother once woke up in the middle of the night and started screaming at the top of his lungs. He was 4 years old at that age, and we had room together. My parents rushed into our room and asked my brother what had happened, while my brother was still sobbing in his bed. After a while my brother looked still terrified, but he calmed down a bit and was able to answer the question. I had a really scary dream. Mom tried to calm him. "Oh, honey, it's okay now." What it was about? She asked, expecting nightmares from the Jurassic Park we were watching earlier that day, but his answer even more chilling. "I dreamed that Pinky and the brain were purple." This thread really deserves a NSFL tag. Jesus. Seriously. Opus. Edit this with a NSFL tag. I have to try and go to work now. When my niece was around 3 or 4 years old, she told me she used to have a baby but it drowned. The baby was called Peanut Butter. But still, asking kids what the names of things are is 100% comedy gold. We having a digging area on the playground at my school, and I always ask the kids what the names of the bugs they find are. The most recent was an earthworm named Fireball. Dude, that's an awesome name for a worm. When I was little, my grandfather, whom I called Pop Pop, always promised to take me fishing. Things always came up, or I wasn't in town to go with him when he went, etc. He died when I was 7, and I never had a chance to go fishing. I had never gone fishing, and have not since he died either. Fast forward 20 years. My wife and I have a 3-year-old daughter. I've never spoken to her about my Pop Pop, and I've never talked about him in front of her. I haven't brought him up to anyone since before my daughter was born. One day, I'm off with my daughter and she's in her room. Suddenly, she comes running into the living room where I'm sitting and says the following. Daddy, we have to go fishing. We don't live near a lake or anything, so this was kinda weird for her to say in the first place. Me, why do we have to go fishing? Because Pop Pop says you have to take me. Me, wait. What? Who told you? Pop Pop says you need to take me to go fish. I'm not really a believer in an afterlife or anything. but I damn sure took her fishing. She has not mentioned Pop Pop since then. And it's been almost a year since that happened. My mom tells this story occasionally. She was driving on the highway in her 20s during a snowstorm and hit some black ice. She spun out, wound up facing the wrong way. While she was spinning, she says she saw her great relative, great aunt or grandmother. Can't remember off the top of my head, who died before she was born. She never met this relative, but recognized her from pictures. Unrelated. But as a child, I often woke up in the night, having to use the bathroom. It was just down the hall, but I was scared hitless of making the walk. And even more terrified of flushing the toilet, because it sounded deafening in the silence of the night. A few particularly scary times. I swear that my grandpa or nana, different sides of the family, waited for me to comfort me. This was after they passed away. I'm 20. This would have been at age 5 or 6. But I still remember it. Edit, for the first story. Forgot to say that the relative was sitting next to her in the passenger seat. Kinda important, I guess. My dad builds houses, and when they're done he has them staged for when they go on the market. As a kid he'd pay me to run around the house with painter's tape to mark out dings and SC8s that had to be patched. Every single house he did I swore I could see my grandfather just chilling in a chair, usually in the sitting/family room. It was usually a double take moment and he disappeared when I'd look directly at the chair, but I could recognize him. A few years later I was out drinking with my dad, and I mentioned how I used to see his father's ghost in all the houses he built. And my dad got serious and told me he used to see the same thing. When my niece was 3, she covered up my head with a blanket and held it down. I moved my head out where I could see her. She said, "You can't come out," and smothered me again. I laughed and said, "Why?" She gritted her teeth and angrily said, "Because I don't want you to. Run. Bro. She's a demon." I was with my sister, her husband, and their 2-year-old daughter. We were talking about loved ones that had recently passed. My father had died sometime recently. My brother-in-law went and grabbed a picture of his mother, who had died in a car crash when he was 6, to show me. When my niece saw the picture though, she started laughing. We asked her what was so funny, and she looked at us and said, "That's my special friend who sings to me." I still shiver a bit just thinking about it. You get shivers, but I think that kind of stuff is heartwarming. The idea that there is an afterlife and those who die can reach out to loved ones they didn't get to know in life. It's creepy because it makes you think about the people who are not loved ones reaching out to you. My niece drew a picture of a man in her room that she kept telling her parents about. He had 2 different colored eyes, and one was gray. When asked why it was gray, she responded, "Because he can see the storm coming." That's fucking awesome. Can you/someone explain why this comment was gilded? I'm just curious. Recently actually. My son always says odd things. Usually they're funny, but this one threw me for a loop. He is 8. I was telling him how much I love him, and thanks for being in my life. He said, "I didn't choose this life. I couldn't control how it began, but I can control how it ends." That kid should go into the movie tagline business. He had no arms or legs. He couldn't hear, see, or speak. This is how he led a nation. Not weird phrases, but my 2-year-old will get frustrated and switch to her demon voice. She makes her voice deep and scratchy sounding until freaks people out the first time they hear it, but my husband and I find it funny now. Only demons can make demon voice, right? It doesn't ask for much. Just for cookies and my soul. My then 3-year-old daughter walked downstairs in the morning and said, "Look what I can do." And she crossed her eyes. I asked her how she learned to do that and she said, "The boy taught me at night." Me, what boy? Her, the boy with the glasses. He did this, and she held her finger up and zoomed it to her nose and crossed her eyes. She said he laughed and laughed. Not too scary, right? Only, that's how my brother taught me to cross my eyes when I was 5 years old. He died when I was 7 years old. That's really sweet. After I shook off the chills, I thought it was sweet too. This is actually a Reddit story. I saw a picture of a horse on r/milled interesting and showed it to my daughter who was 2 at the time and loves horses. She says it's going to die soon, and I was like, what did you say? And she repeated it's going to die soon. Eventually I figured out that she was talking about my phone battery being low. 2% edgy, 4% me. Not my child but myself, apparently. Because I can't remember. I was 4 and now I'm 28. But my parents told me. I once got my toe stuck under a door and lost skin due to it. When I went to kindergarten the day after, the teacher asked what happened. I told her my dad did it with a knife. My parents had to come to school that evening for a talk. Oops. I told my kindergarten or first grade teacher that my mom did drugs, she smokes cigarettes. They called her in, and she had to explain it, lol. I told my kindergarten teacher my mom drinks and drives, she does, while drinking Pepsi. We were driving down a dark, snowy highway late one evening, final stretch of a 16-hour-long road trip. My son, who was around 4 or 5 at the time, was in the back seat and becoming a bit restless. He suddenly covered his face with a blanket and announced loudly, "I don't want to get glass on my face." A few moments later, a pickup truck towing some snowmobiles pulled out in front of a tractor trailer a few cars in front of us and got hit, spinning out into the median. Fortunately, we avoided the accident completely. It was indeed a bit creepy, though. Almost as though he predicted there was going to be an accident right in front of us. That's intense. I'm a believer of intuition hardcore. If my kid says something like that, I sure as duck pull over. Seen too many things go terribly awry for people not trusting their guts and others. Really glad you guys got through safe and sound. What if pulling over is what causes you to get in an accident? Not a parent. Blah blah blah. Babysitting a young girl. 4, 5 years old. She wakes up, stares out into the pitch black garden, no street lights within a few hundred meters. Can't see anything but black outside, and says "baddie man" over and over. Cue me hitting myself. I tell her everything's fine and to go back to bed. She's not disturbed by anything. Just keeps saying "baddie man." She goes to sleep, and my paranoia grows. Every sound has me on edge. Eventually her parents come home, and I'm like, oh no, everything's fine, and walk home. Next day I see them and tell them about it. Apparently she'd recently watched The Lion King, and they had a hedge in their garden that the kid thought looked like Scar, who she called "baddie man." I totally wouldn't have walked home without talking to the parents. I wouldn't have been able to sleep. I'm one of those people that has to do a running jump if there's a gap under my bed after turning out the light. I can't walk upstairs if there's an open banister in case something grabs my feet, and all body parts must be under the quilt covers. I live my life afraid of boogeymen, but I've learned to be logical about it. I've come to terms with the fact that they don't exist, and I can make myself be brave in short bursts, enough to walk home anyway. Obligatory, not a parent. But, as a young child, age 3, 5, I would sleepwalk into my parents' room and stand by their bed quietly. My dad would wake up, find me, and try to put me back to bed. I would tell him I couldn't go back to bed because the tall men are walking. This stopped immediately after moving from that particular house. The tall men comments stopped. The sleepwalking continued and still happens. Then, when I was around 15, we were at church one day and I overheard one of the younger kids, 3, ask his parents, as they walked away, "Who are those men?" "What men, honey?" The tall men with Iboko. Didn't sleep well for a couple of nights after that. Edit for clarity. Edit to Iboko is my username. My username. From the names of the 3 dogs that my husband and I had when first dating. Had all of them from puppies. One died of cancer at 16. One of old age at 19, and the third is still with us and about to turn 17. Iris. Bonata. C.I.'s Co. Edit 3, for those who didn't read Edit 2. An Iboko is a soul that has been cursed for a sin committed by their ancestors. Their only hope for atonement is to wander through life, repeating themselves incessantly in the hopes that somewhere, someone will actually listen. Sorry, I'm recovering from surgery and feeling kinda froggy. It was the Harlem Globetrotters. waiting, biding their time until they can help you solve a groovy mystery. Child had woken up early, so she was watching cartoons next to me in my bed while I tried to wake up. I'd heard a funny sound downstairs earlier that I mentally blamed on the dogs. Then kiddo leans over to me and remarks, "Oh, there's a man in the house." Awake, awake, awake. Never found anything. Never got any further details from her. One Saturday afternoon I was taking a nap. Woke to the front door slamming and my 5-year-old daughter running upstairs sobbing, "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I'm fully awake and look her over. And I check with her that she's okay. I'm clearly relieved that she's okay. And she calms down enough to tell me, "I blew up your car." I tell her again that if she's okay is all that matters. But what happened? She was watching cartoons. Then went to the fridge and pulled a can of root beer out. It was her favorite drink to share with us. But had never gotten a can out on her own that I knew of. She had trouble breaking the seal and the air started leaking out slowly. She thought it was going to explode, so ran nervously all the way to the front door. Opened it. Then threw the can like a grenade next to my car. Sure enough, I find a barely opened can of root beer next to the intact car. Frag out. Ducking, like and subscribe.